Welcome back to Afternoon Express live on SABC3. Now, Megan Faure, after years of success with her Baby Sense range, is now adding a new piece to the collection, Pregnancy Sense. So new, in fact, that she hasn't even finished writing it yet. We're back on the couch with Megan Faure.
So, as if having a baby isn't stressful enough, before that, actually, pregnancy and giving birth must be so foreign.
Yeah.
So, Pregnancy Sense, an obvious, I think, progression from Baby Sense. Why did you decide to write it, though?
I think that we needed a South African book on pregnancy that dealt with having a sensational birth. And so my idea was, let's present birth to mums as something that is sensational, but not ideal. And, you know, the critical thing is that very often people go, right, there's this ideal birth, which maybe for some people might be a caesarean section, for other people it might be a natural, and people have preconceived ideas about it. But actually every woman's sensational birth is her own. And so the idea was that we would empower mums to make decisions with their gynae or midwife in such a way that they felt like they were actually making the decisions. And that's what the book's all about, is empowering mums with the full knowledge given to them, like we did in Baby Sense, at kind of layman's terms, and then being able to actually be empowered and say, right, this is how I'm going to give birth. These are the interventions I want. And that was the idea behind it.
And what has women's reaction to your work been? Because I remember when I was pregnant, I almost needed an answer for everything. If I felt one twitch or one strange feeling, I wanted to look it up and find out what it was.
Yeah. Well, pregnancy is so foreign because our body changes in 9 months, like hourly. Every minute there's something new. And you're terrified because you're not sure if those little twinges that are going on in your pelvis are actually signs of labour, or is the baby okay? And what if the baby isn't moving at the moment?
The stress.
So it is stressful. So we're just trying to make it really normalised and not medicalised. You know, there are books out there that are terribly medical, and it really doesn't help anyone, you know, it just makes more anxiety.
It's so important for it to be written, though, so that your everyday person can understand it. But is there such a thing as a sensational pregnancy? I mean, did you have a good pregnancy? Did you enjoy being pregnant?
I loved being pregnant, except obviously in the last month, you just want the baby to come.
Yes.
But I remember I was so settled by the time I had the baby that I wanted a home birth. I wanted it to be natural. I wanted it to be a water birth, and I wanted it to be without painkillers. And I did all of that, and it was a sensational birth. It took 8 hours, but it was breathtaking, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. But there's such a contention around whether to have a caesarean, whether to have a natural birth, and more women are struggling with that decision. Why is that?
Yeah, look, I mean, what you describe, in my mind, is a sensational birth, but it's not necessarily every woman's ideal. And I think the idea with a birth plan is to have a plan that is very flexible, because a lot of mothering and pregnancy and birth, but a lot of mothering is just accepting what's happening around you. Because if you can have that acceptance about what's happening around you and not be rigid and not try and control it, and not have the ultimate say in everything, you're much more likely to be able to have the type of sensational birth that you had. And a birth by caesarean section can also be sensational if you're part of it, if you've made the choice and if you've accepted where you're at.
Yeah, and when women are pregnant, it's obviously important to maintain the womb a stress-free environment. How can women make sure that the baby is stress-free during the pregnancy?
That you've raised one of the most contentious issues that we've had to deal with in the book. There is an enormous amount of research out there that shows that stress can cross the placenta, go to the baby, and cause the baby to become stressed as well. It doesn't help a mother who's stressed, though, to know that, because if she's feeling stressed and she can't escape her stress, it doesn't help her to know that she's not doing the best for her baby. So we deal with that a lot, quite a few times through the book. The one thing that I always say to mums is that you must differentiate stress, which is like a fender bender, you know, somebody who irritates you at work, a mother-in-law who's on your case, from toxic stress. And toxic stress is generally interpersonal, something you cannot escape, and something you cannot control. So something like physical and emotional abuse by somebody.
A bad marriage or...
A really bad marriage could constitute toxic stress. And in those circumstances, I do recommend that a mum speaks to a psychologist, that she gets help. And just having somebody who listens to her and who can actually help her through it and support her will really help a lot. But that's what you're trying to avoid.
Okay, but what happens then to a stressed baby? What are the effects, or what is a stressed baby? What does it do? Or...
A certain amount of stress is very good. So that's the first thing we know, that a little bit of stress in pregnancy is a good thing for babies. It helps their brains to become resilient. It helps them to bounce back.
Oh, wow,
so that's good. But when stress becomes toxic, so you cannot escape it, you get neurotransmitters crossing over to the baby that changes the wiring of the brain and the sensitivity to stress later. So when that same child is then presented with a very stressful situation, they might have a hyper response to a stressful situation that another child might be able to kind of gloss over. So that's what we're talking about. But again, we need to be so careful with mums that we're not loading them with more guilt, because there's lots of mums out there who are in stressful situations that they can't escape. And so we've got to be sensitive. We deal with it quite sensitively in the book.
And for first-timers out there who are pregnant for the first time and they're excited and they're at the genesis of their journey, what health tips do you have for them for both their health and baby's health?
First of all, I mean, it was wonderful that we've just spoken about diet. Diet is exceptionally important. You're delivering the micronutrients for the brain's development right the way through pregnancy. In the last trimester, you want lots of lovely fish oils and omega-3s, because that really has been shown to myelinate the brain and cause bright babies. But there's also, very importantly, things that are really toxic to the brain, and alcohol is one of them. We just don't know how much, and that's the problem with the alcohol debate. Is many people will say a glass a day is fine, but in actual fact, for some sensitive brains and vulnerable brains, a glass a day isn't fine.
It's too much.
And so we do say things in the book, and we really enlighten moms on these debates, and then say, look, you're going to make your own choice. But alcohol in pregnancy is toxic, bottom line.
Wow. And what about external stimulation? Like, can a baby hear what's going on? Like, if you were sitting here pregnant and I was speaking to you, would the baby hear my voice or playing music? Are external stimulants affecting the child?
Well, I've got to tell you that a product came out about 3 months ago that is a little thing that gets inserted into the vagina, and it plays music off your iPod.
No!
So the
why wasn't that around when I was pregnant? Oh my gosh.
I'm putting that on my baby shower list for one day when I have a baby.
What's it called?
Where's that music coming from?
It's called a baby pod.
A baby pod.
A baby pod. So it plugs into your iPod or your phone. Anyway, the whole thing is that you actually shouldn't be doing this, because so I'm saying these crazy things are out there. But what actually happens is that the baby can hear, and the baby learns in the last trimester of pregnancy. So by the time the baby's born, he recognises his mum's voice and his dad's voice.
Wow.
The problem with these things that are inserted so close to the baby's ears is that we're not sure exactly how many decibels a baby's ear takes. And in fact, the other thing we know is that in utero, that's the perfect environment for the baby to develop. So inserting things that aren't naturally there for the baby to hear, aside from the possible infection and all sorts of other stuff, is really not a good idea. So yes, babies learn in utero, their brains and senses are taking it all in, but the ultimate sensory environment actually is the womb. So any of the fancy stuff that a mom's trying to do, like playing earphones on the outside, Beethoven, don't do it. Don't do it.
Hip-hop.
We're taking your questions and your comments on Facebook on Afternoon Express.